It's episode 106 with
Woo!
with Geoff Nicholson.
Hey, all right.
What's up?
Fine. How are you guys? You all right?
We're okay. Well, I'm okay. I don't know about Dylan.
Doing all right. I can't see anything now.
I've got like loads of things to do after I'm off air with you guys, so I'm kind of annoyed because normally I would be in the pub, which is that's itching at the back of my brain a wee bit. Like, you're not at a bar. Why is this not happening?
Hey, this is not a sober podcast. You can absolutely bring the bar here.
Oh, I normally would as well, but I'm driving in like an hour and a half, so it's pretty devastating to me.
Yeah, I'm like packing things up because I'm hopefully moving soon, and I have like this whiskey that's just here in my room.
Oh, it's a shame.
As well, doesn't it?
And I'm like, I don't drink normally, like just by myself. I don't get how people can do that. So it's just sitting there. And I was like actually thinking, like, should I just dump that? That's a waste of like $14. Yeah, it's not like the best or anything. But I was like, what do I do with this? Just like save it. Because the only time I drink normally is either with friends or like when we do our like virtual Comic-Con in November.
Once a year, yeah.
Yeah. So it's either birthdays or then. So
I wish I could say the same. I host a podcast on a Thursday, and we drink. That's like it's beer and comics is the remit. So yeah, it's quite weird podcasting without beer. It doesn't feel like.
He's like, in fact, I started the podcast for the beer. Like that was the whole point.
You can just do this. Just hold
Somebody's like, you got a problem, and I'm like, what are you talking about? It's a podcast. That's awesome.
I don't know if you guys have it. We obviously we have guests on who are from all over the world, and sometimes we've had guests who are it's like super early in the morning, and we are always kind of 8 p.m. UK time, so we're quite happy to start beving, and then but then we had a Brendan Wright, who's an artist from New Zealand, and it was like 7:30 in the morning where he was, and it was just like he's like, I'm not drinking. I was like, okay.
Got to start the day off while it's young.
Yeah, there's a guy that's on our platform actually that is from Finland, and he wants to be on our podcast, but I'm trying to like figure out when. And I'm like, and it's been like over a year that I'm trying to figure that out. And I'm like, I don't know when would be a good time.
I think it's 5 p.m. where I am right now. I know it's like, is it midday where you guys are?
Yeah.
It's noon for him, 11 for me.
I think Finland's about 2 hours ahead of me. 1 hour, 2 hour ahead of me. So it's evening time there, like early evening, I think.
The only time he really messaged me was like on Twitter or Facebook, and it was like when I'm at work because I work overnights. Yeah. So I'm like, well, I'm up, but I can't like do a podcast because I'm at work. But it's not like I'm doing anything at work. So, and then our one friend Hector is actually moving to New Zealand like July or something. So that should be fun to figure out doing things because he's like an artist for one of our comics.
Nice.
Social media doesn't help either, particularly when you're working, in the creative. I think because social media, you just send a message out and you just wait until it's received. So
Yeah. Yeah, we had one person, but they live in like Brazil, so like the time wasn't that bad. I think it was the same time that I have, so that was okay. But like if I have my colorist. Our colorist is in Indonesia, so I don't know what time it is there. I have no idea. I even asked for his address. His address is like very, very long. And I'm like, yeah, can I have your address so I can send like all the comics you've ever done with us there? And he's like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, is this your whole address? It's like an essay. I was like, why do you guys have such like weird addresses? It's weird.
I think that about Americans, to be honest. Like I when I'm putting things like I'm putting Kickstarter stuff out to the States. I have somebody that's backed my last book, and they're from. It's like, what's it called? Like It's in Michigan. And
Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah, it's not Detroit. I know Detroit because the Lions play there, aren't they? And that's where Motown's from. Is that right? That's Detroit.
Yeah.
But,
You're like, I'm going to say this with confidence and hope it's true.
yeah. If you say it with enough confidence, folk don't correct you.
I'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds exactly right. Yeah. Of course, there's alligators in Canada.
Yeah, totally. Hi, where are they from? Victory Township, I think it's called. And like, that's just that sounds awesome, but it's the fact that it's a township, I don't know what that quite means. Are all towns townships and we just don't call them that, or
maybe I was going to say that I know that if it has township in the title of it, that could just be the name of it. But like, for example, like my hometown is Mechanicville, and like Ville just for city, but like it's technically like the city of Mechanicville. So if it was a village of something or a town of something, but if it's something township, that's probably just the name of the whole thing. Yeah. But like, for example, like if you were to mail something to Mechanicville, you wouldn't put city of. So if you had to, then that would be part of the name. It's like. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. That's why, like, when you're saying it's hard, like it's interesting sending stuff to America. It's like the address is so simple. It's like the most specific, so the number of the house, then it's the street that you're on, so the next most specific, then the city that you're in, the next most specific, the state that you're in, the next, and so it keeps just getting more generalized as you go outward. It's like so simple.
I suppose that's exactly the same with the UK. When you explain it like that, it is like your door number, your street, your town, your county, your country.
Yeah, I think the only thing we don't include is the county, but that's just because I think probably for the length of the address sake, like there's no need for it, because if there are any duplicate cities in a state, the zip code would distinguish where they're from.
Yeah.
So like the zip code's kind of like the override mark.
That's basically part of the address I don't like about international addresses is the zip code.
The zip code, because like they're completely random.
Not just numbers like here. It's just like mine's 12303. Well, I almost had to think about that for a second. It's gonna change, but like our friend Dylan, it's another Dylan that's in Dublin, and when he wrote his address, I was like, okay, I'm gonna check with you before I send anything. Is there a reason why you have Dublin down for like 4 times? He's like, oh, that was by accident. I'm like, oh, okay. So like, what is it? And he's like, it's just Dublin, Ireland. I'm like, all right, it's not like Dublin, Ireland. And he's like, no.
Oh yeah, I remember looking at that address thinking like that seemed weird. Like I wasn't sure if it was duplicated for a reason.
But then it's like A1 slow yurt. I was like, I don't know what that is, but that's the zip code thing.
I thought it was true because my only joke about Dublin that I know, I thought maybe he was trying to get one up on you there, is that Dublin's the biggest city in Ireland because it keeps Dublin and Dublin and Dublin. So maybe
And then he's like, oh, did you send me something? I'm like, yeah, your rewards from like 2 years ago are finally being sent. He's like, oh, yeah, I have to pay like a tax. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I have to pay like a postage fee for you sending stuff from there. And I was like, that's stupid. And he's like, yeah, I think that's only Ireland that does that. I was like, that's so dumb. Why do you have to pay to receive something that you already paid for?
It's like a sales tax on a sales tax.
Yeah, we do that over here. It's not all the time, but it is some things.
It might be a certain weight or something. Because I sent 3 comics to him. Yeah, I think it was like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I feel like there shouldn't be enough weight to like trigger a tax.
Post office people just don't want to do their jobs because there's an old lady that's just like, is there any way to make this package just not so heavy? I'm like, this isn't heavy. What is heavy to you? She's like, well, it's 14 ounces. It's like heavier than what it should be. I was like, how much do you think a comic book should be? Like with other stuff in there. She's
well, like, 14 ounces for a comic book is pretty heavy.
Well, but it's more than one comic. So I'm just like,
I just find post offices with comics quite stressful anyway, because I don't know if you guys get the same thing, but like when they always ask you how much it's worth, and you're like,
yeah,
well that's quite a complicated question you're asking me because I wrote the thing, right? So I'm
worth $1 million.
I'm a much however, it does retail for like $5.
Yeah, no, it's crazy too because in the States we have something called media mail where we're allowed to send like books and DVDs and CDs through mail at a slightly cheaper rate. And it turns out that the reason for that is specifically for educational purposes. Like if I want to send somebody a book to learn, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So we can put our comic books in there, right? And they're like, no, comic books don't count. They're not educational. I'm like, but DVDs count? Like, yeah, how are you going to clarify? Like, you don't ask me what DVD I'm putting in there, right? It's just if it's a DVD, right? You can't even clarify because you'd have to make a bunch of rules to figure out whether or not a DVD classifies. But this is a comic book with book in the title of it. And they're like, yeah, sorry, it doesn't count.
You're standing there with fucking, I don't know, a copy of Mouse and in American Pie.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking of. It's like, aside from the fact that there absolutely are comics that are educational, it also has to do with the fact that I think that they said that the main thing is like they're a highly imaged. They're like a bunch of images, not a lot of text, and that's what classifies it as a comic. I'm like, well, then what do you do for like children's books that are educational? And like, oh, they count if they're hardcover. I'm like, so if you're telling me if I wrap this thing in some cardboard, you'll count it? Like, it's the stupidest rules. Yeah.
I got media mail on some of the packages that I sent out because this one girl that was kind of new in the post office, she was like doing it until this old lady came over and ruined my day. She just like, she's like, oh, what are you doing? And then the girl's like, doing my job? And then I'm like, yeah, she's doing her job. Just go away.
Yeah, go away.
she
puts her in a sleeper hold. Just like
she's like, you can't send comics media mail. I'm like, that's why. I know so many people that get away with that. Well, they shouldn't. And I'm like, whatever.
But yeah, they need one of me in the office to ruin their day.
Yeah. So you have a Kickstarter that's literally launching in a couple hours.
Yeah, well, it will be. Is it Wednesday this goes out, isn't it? So it'll have been hopefully fully funded by the time that this goes out. But it goes out. Yeah. It goes out 8:30 Sunday evening. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we're recording it, but yeah, hopefully it's fun before this episode.
Oh, so we're doing like a launch event, and I'm gonna get quite a few comic creators from Scotland to come and pop on. You guys are more than welcome to. Just if you want to join in. We're it's called Geoff of the Juniors, and it's just basically I don't know, how do you describe juniors? It's funny talking about this on an American podcast. Yeah, so junior non-league football, so non-league soccer.
Oh, like yeah, we have like what do we call it? There's like pee-wee football, and then there's like intramurals, or there's like what's the age?
Like,
oh, so this it's fully it's senior level, so it's like I don't know why they call it juniors. I should probably go and look that up. But
yeah,
junior league.
Yeah, so there's junior.
Just like if it's non-professional, then it's probably just intramural is what it would be called for us. Because like we have like what is it pee-wee, and then there's like JV and then varsity. Which is just junior varsity. But once you get out of high school and you're in college, if you're not playing college football or sports, if you're not playing a college sport or a professional sport, any other type of sport is typically called an intramural sport.
Yeah, there's Pop Warner, but I think that's Pee.
No, Pop Warner is the Pee-wee stuff. Yeah, Pop Warner is the other name.
So it's basically that. I find this stuff fascinating. So it's different in every country, which is like a lot of the stuff I've kind of discussed. I've been exploring. In Scotland, we have what's called the pyramid system, which you have like the Premier League or the Scottish Premier Football League, I think it's called. It changes its name every couple of years. But that's like at the top, and there's like 12 teams in there. And then you've got like another 3 divisions below that. And then anything below that's regarded as like non-league. But then there's like 8 tiers. So like you can I think the idea is that if you wanted to, anybody could form a team and go in at like tier 8 and work your way up. And then
that's actually really cool.
It's happened, and it happens in it like it's quite trendy at the moment for celebrities to like pay into this system. They do it down in England. Ryan Reynolds and I can't ever say his second name, but Ryan Reynolds and Rob, the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. How do you pronounce his second name?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember his last name.
Rob McKenney, I think.
Something like that.
They are on the board of directors for a team called Wrexham, in England. Their social media is amazing, by the way. You should totally check it out. It's brilliant. And Wrexham, and I think they're in Wales, but they play in an English division, which is strange because British soccer is quite weird that way. You have like Scottish teams that are, officially their pitch is found in England, but geographically it makes more sense for them to play in the Scottish divisions and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a bit silly, and particularly at the level of football where I've kind of based my comic, it is generally played in villages of a couple thousand, but it's really quite, you go on like a Sunday or Saturday afternoon, with your parents. Everybody knows everybody that's there. There's always like a bar nearby, and it's just great. And you're so close to the pitch that like you can shout at the referee, and he'll actually stop the game to come and like ask you to be quiet and things like that. So it's just it's just and
I just tried. You keep saying close to the pitch. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, so like the playing field, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never heard it called that before. But yeah, the pitch.
You genuinely, like, if somebody in some grounds you're so close to the sideline that if somebody is like doing like in soccer, obviously you've got throw-ins and you've got corners, but those guys will back up into you, and you have to take a step back to give them space to do it's brilliant. Scotland and football's like, I think it's the biggest sport in Scotland, but there's such a weird kind of at the top end, guys are making professional living wage off it and doing really, really well. And obviously down in England, it's kind of more, I think, more of the level of the NFL, where guys are, they're getting paid millions of pounds a year to do the sport. And they've got like whereas, but in Scotland, it's like there is that level to it. It's not massive, but there is that level to it. And then you've got this just like lower level that's like almost to the people that follow it is as important, but it's just I love it, and it's quite funny. I take my dad along, and it's just some of the stories, and I was writing some of these stories down. I've made this comic called Geoff the Juniors about it. So things like I went to see Oakley United. So Oakley's a small village in Scotland. I went to see them play because my a friend from work's husband is on the board of directors. So she was like, "Oh, there's going to be a big game. You should come along." And I was standing next to her, and she heard a couple folk further along the line were complaining about the food, and complaining about how like her pies were, like they were eating a pie and going, "This pie is disgusting." And my friend was like, she turned to me, and she was like, "That's really cheeky. That's really rude. I microwaved that pie myself." It's like, just like, okay, it's hardly fine dining though, man. You went to the store, bought a bulk set of pies, and then threw them in the microwave. It wasn't like you didn't bake it. It's like, just things like that, and just I think stuff like that's quite funny. And so it makes me giggle. So I thought, oh, it must be. I wonder if there's that whole thing. It's like a shared experience where people go and they quite like. So
yeah, it's like I can't be the only one having this odd experience. Yeah. That's awesome. Where in Scotland are you?
So I'm about an hour north of Edinburgh, in an area called Fife. So
gotcha. The reason I was curious, I just realized I actually have a friend I think who lives in Edinburgh. How do you say that name?
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I actually have a friend who lives there. He runs like a marketing company there. I just realized that. I'm like, oh yeah, I think I know somebody from Scotland.
Well, most people know like it's I do love there's loads of stuff. I love just chatting to people from other countries about Scotland, because there's the I don't know, Edinburgh, but it gets pronounced Edinburgh quite a lot of places. Glasgow is like go, but the last three letters of Glasgow are GOW, so it gets mispronounced Glasgow quite a lot, but it is just Glasgow. I just love it. And then obviously we've got, because of our kind of shady historical past, we spent quite the British people using Scottish ships predominantly went and took over the whole world for a wee while there.
Just for a little bit.
It's quite interesting. I've got friends that live in Canada, and a lot of the places in sort of Nova Scotia are named after places So
Yeah.
there's like and the same in America as well, I suppose. Just the West Coast, the East Coast, sorry, isn't it? So you've got say you've got New York, which is the New York, but the old
Yeah.
York. Am I allowed to swear in this podcast?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. The old York's an absolute shithole. Like it's like
That's why we made a new one. It's so much better.
but the new one's like the most important one of the most important cities in the world. But the old one is like, yeah.
Well, it's funny too because even like New York, like the state itself, like I feel like everyone in the world, like when they hear New York, they just think of the city, but the state's like I don't know, 70 times bigger than just that one part of the, the city, like landmass wise. But like I get it because of all the people that even live in America, that you know a bigger than 1 percentile lives in New York City, I believe. So.
It's just I love it. I'm just googling it just now. Cause my town's called Dunfermline. But there's a village in Illinois called Dunfermline as well, which I'm assuming. But and I love that. It's just like there's loads of them, and one of my favorite holiday resorts is a small coastal town called Whitby, and I believe there's a Canada's got their own Whitby, which is just all that sort of stuff. I was watching a documentary about dog shows, and the grand final of the Canadian dog shows happens in Whitby. I was like, that's quite funny.
There's a comedian, Daniel Tosh, and he had a thing in his stand-up one time that he was talking about. I think it's pretty annoying. I think it's him or Tom Segura, and they're like talking about how there's like states that have cities that are named after like actual cool places.
Oh, like that's Tom Segura. He's talking about Paris. He's like Paris, Louisiana, or whatever it is, or Texas, and they're like,
next week I'll be in Paris, Alabama, but in my mind, that's Daniel Tosh. He's like, but in my mind, I'm gonna be in Hawaii.
Yeah. Tom Segura is the one that jokes about the fact there's a couple of like huge cities in Europe, like Paris, that we have a city here named after that city, and it is named after that city, but like they're not even close. Like it's not a big city. It's barely a small city with like something that's entertaining there. That's about it.
Yeah, they got like a smaller version of the Eiffel Tower or something. He's like,
yep.
There's like a Toronto or something. There's a Toronto, Texas, or I don't know where it is, but there's something like that somewhere else. I'm just like, why? How do you do that?
I love it. I just assumed that had to do, particularly some of the British names had to do with like settlers just trying to like.
Like York, for example, like New York and the old York. It's literally people that came from there and they settled the area, so. Now it's New York, like this is the people of that area, and then they name it that way. Like, that's what's like super interesting about the States is that we have a lot of areas that have names that sometimes, like if like city by city, they don't always match. So like you have New York, which makes sense because people that came from Europe came over here, and they're like, hey, we were from York, now we're gonna name this New York. And then we have like random cities that are also named after like tribes that were already here, like Schenectady, and you're like. Where the hell did that name come from, right? And then like and then right next to it, it's like Albany. I think there's Albany's also from somewhere in Europe. I don't remember where, but like there's like cities that just like alternate, like localized stuff, foreign stuff. And then the one that got me recently was I just learned that so the word or the name for Japan in Japanese is Nihon, and the symbols actually stand for. It's like sun origin, and it turns out that it's from the perspective of China because the sun rises from the east coming from Japan, so Japan is known as the origin of the sun, right? Oh, cool. And that's like an awesome ass name, and then you're like, what's America named after? Like some dude. Like the name America is like some dude's last name, like and I'm sure that means something, but that's not why we named it America. We named it that because somebody mapped out the territory and his name was America. We're like, yeah, we're just gonna call it that. Like, so it's just interesting where a lot of our names in the States, I feel like we just took from other places, and we're like, I feel like this looks like a New York, I feel like this looks like a Alabama, like they're just making up names or they're taking names from people. Lots of cities named after people. But yeah, it's just interesting that like some other countries in the world and some other states within them or provinces within them have a name that like is relevant to that area.
Yeah.
And we're just like, whatever.
Quite I was trying to come up with like I've got a comic series called The Spirit of Enki, which is it's a superhero series set in Iraq. But one of my main protagonists is an American ex-soldier, and I was trying to come up with like what I thought was like a cool American sounding name, and so I went with the name Clyde because Bonnie and Clyde, and that was pretty cool. But then it wasn't until a month later, ish, after I'd like properly written it, that like one of my friends, Colin, who is a comic writer as well, he was kind of like, I thought it was quite clever that you named your American after something Scottish. I was like, what?
Like, so Clyde's
What
a
are you
Scottish
talking about?
name?
The Clyde's a river that is there. Is
Oh,
the river that runs through Glasgow.
Oh, cutting out a
So
little
it's like,
bit.
all right. Apparently, that's the origin. That's the origin of that name. Is that I went to Glasgow with my children, and I was like, I just remembered that there. I was like, why did that take so long to make that connection? It's just so weird. Sometimes
That's actually cool though, because you got a name of like an infamous American, and you also got a local name, so that's kind of a cool cool connection there.
it's quite an infamous river as well, to be honest.
yeah.
That's awesome.
For our universe or whatever, we have instead of North America, we have what is it called? The Commonwealth of Whitmire.
Yeah, we basically like, looked up a bunch of different. We looked up all the different like ways you could name a territory. Like like we have like the United States, so it's a collection of states, and then like what else could you have? You could have districts, or you can have commonwealths, and we're like, okay, let's go with that. And then we're like, all right, so it's got to be the Commonwealth of something. And I think we ended up like looking up somebody else.
The really old like mayor from Schenectady.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was like an old mayor from Schenectady that we're pretty sure didn't have any negative stereotypes towards him. Like, like we were like, let's go back far enough and let's make sure that they're clean. And then we're just like, let's just take this name, and then we're gonna call our whole area that.
Yeah. So it's called that, but then it's broken up into different districts, and then there's like cities and towns within those districts. So there's like 4 or 6 or something different districts throughout that continent, and then there's a bunch of other ones, but I don't have like a Russia. I have where like South America is, so it's not all of Russia, but it's like name something called Moscow. Different. W out. Different. So it's like Moscow.
Oh, where'd he go? He disappeared. He said something, and then all of a sudden he vanished. Greg, have we been on a podcast, or is we just imagining this whole thing?
It's just a ghost.
It's just a random camera into some guy's living room. It's like, what's happening?
I think the last episode too was something weird.
Yeah, you started cutting out a little bit. Yeah, even right now you're cutting out a little bit. You were actually fine the whole time, and then like within like the last 2 minutes, like it starts getting a little choppy.
Like the screens go black, and then they're like buffering. And I'm like, I don't get why it's doing that because my internet's fine. So yeah, it's weird.
Oh wait, is that him? Is the ghost returned?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm trying. I've got a really. I don't like you said. Like I'm like, oh, something's wrong with my internet, but it's totally strong. Apologies.
Yeah, no worries. Something just happened to Greg too. I don't know if I'm chopping for you guys, but like, yeah, like all of a sudden, like you were started chopping, Greg and I were back and forth, and then all of a sudden, Greg starts chopping, and I'm like, is it me? Did I do this?
I did it on the last episode, and then before that, I didn't do it. I don't think really at all. So I just don't get why the internet is doing that. When I move, I'm getting better internet. So
yeah, I can't wait until Google Fiber is like officially solidified here, because like they're still like laying all the lines down, but Google Fiber has like 2 gigabyte speed, and I'm like, I'll never have a problem again.
I had Dave McKean on my podcast last week. I've like last year, sorry, I've had like really like not had no issue with my internet for years, and then it was literally like that evening. It's never been amazing, but I'll say he was quite a big deal for us in terms of like guest status, because he wrote or he drew Arkham Asylum's a serious
Oh.
for a serious Earth, and he's Neil Gaiman's artist and stuff like that. And we were like, this is really really cool. And then like it was like this, and it got to the point that actually I went away and had a wee cry and let my co-hosts like man the show for a bit. I was like, oh, this is a disaster.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things that I think when I was in upstate New York, the second I got access to fiber optics, I jumped on that, and I think it was like maybe like 500 megabytes or something like that. I don't remember what it was, something way higher than all the cable lines were offering. And then when I moved to Nashville, I found out they had the gigabyte internet, and I'm like, yep, I'm never going back, because like I couldn't stand like being on a show or doing stuff like this, and then it would disconnect. And so now, like, if there's ever a disconnect, it is extremely rare that it's on my end. And if it is, it's usually like a technical issue, not because of like internet speeds or bandwidth. Because like with fiber optic, there's no bandwidth problems because you can send information both directions. But when you're running copper lines, they can only send one direction at a time. And that's why people can get choppy if like someone starts like streaming something and you're trying to upload video, it'll just start cutting that stuff out.
Yeah. So
I love it. I love being, as a podcaster, I love being on a podcast with other podcasters because the conversation just goes into total random directions. I don't know if this is interesting to any. You're like, yeah, so they had this other podcaster on, and then they like started just talking about like the fiber optic capabilities of. I was on a podcast a couple of years ago. We just talked about how good StreamYard was for ages.
It's awesome too. Yeah, like it is fun because when you're with other podcasters, like you've all like everyone who's done a podcast has dealt with the same issues at least once. It doesn't matter. Like I've had the gigabyte internet and still have my internet cut out. Like it happens. Like so like everyone's dealt with all these problems before. Like I think one time I was supposed to hop on with Greg, and something happened where I couldn't get anything to open on my computer. I had to close everything down, restart it, update it, do a bunch of stuff. And we were supposed to already have started the episode and all this. And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's been like 10 minutes, 20 minutes of like trying to get everything to work, and our guest is waiting. And like, I've almost never, like I built a beast computer so I wouldn't have to deal with it. I got gigabyte speed internet, so I don't have to deal with it. And for whatever reason, I remember what happened, Greg. It was my antivirus. Like I was using an antivirus, I don't remember that, it's AVG, I think, and something happened where like there was an error when it went to update, and it basically started acting like a virus. It was eating up all of the memory on my computer, and I couldn't get anything to run, and I had to uninstall it, and then it froze during the uninstallation process, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm like, get off of my computer. It's like, what is this, Windows 10?
It's stressful when you've got a guest on as well because it's like it's their time as well, and you're like, oh no.
I swear I didn't mean to.
Yeah, with that episode, I just started without him, and then like we talked, and then we did like a separate thing after that. I think that was one of the unreleased things. I don't remember, but we just kept talking. But yeah, I was just talking about the Crow and whatever else.
Well, now that we've talked to all the podcasters out there, why don't you share a little bit more about your podcast and what you guys do for your podcast?
Okay. So we have a podcast called The Brewgooders, the beer and comics podcast, and it's myself, my friend Colin Maxwell, who is a total dude. He's a really good guy. He's also a successful comic writer, currently working for DC Thompson, who are probably the second or third biggest comic company in the UK. Known for the Beano and the Dandy. I don't know. Do you guys get the Beano and the Dandy over there?
That name sounds familiar, but I don't think I've seen
it. Yeah. Just a nice wee a pretty cool company from Dundee in Scotland, but they're known for just loads of things. So they do the Beano and the Dandy are like their two major comic creations that have got I don't know, like they've got statues of them in Dundee and stuff like that. They've got and just very, very British, I suppose, very Scottish. They also have a comic line that they've put out for years called Commando Comics, which are sort of small let me see if I've got one here actually. Small 5 books that come out weekly and are titled here. Let's see if I've got one. Might even have Colin. Just give me a second. But yeah, so we have Colin a week. Yeah, we just kind of talk about comics and beer every week. We all bring a comic. We all bring a beer. We've also got my friend. Here's a Commando comic. There's Colin's one actually signed. You guys see that? Okay. Whatever.
Nope. One's like you're still frozen. Like it showed you like go to grab something and then you're like you're like reaching to the side and like you're all silhouetted, which is cool. But and then it just fast forwarded. I don't know. Oh, it's a little dark. Okay. So now I saw it in front of the screen, but it was dark.
Okay.
I see it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Everyone just needs to check out Colin Maxwell from Commando Comics. But yeah. And then we've got my friend Dave Crana, who is he has a comic series called Glass City, which is about a sort of fictional.
Is this it right here?
Hold on, I'm frozen now as well. Give me a second. Probably backwater Scotland. Apologies, guys. Let's have a look.
But it's called Commando with a big red C with a yellow outline.
Yeah, the Home of Heroes. It's like an action comic that comes out every couple of weeks.
Yeah, it looks like they have a bunch of. Oh my God, it says issue number 5,538. So I'm assuming there's a couple of these.
Yeah, so yeah, Colin's one is 5,000. His first one anyway, because he's got about 5 stories in there. His current one's 5,371. That's pretty cool. So yeah, he's by far. Oh, there you are. Yeah, that's it. I've caught up with you now. Absolutely. So yeah, Commando, massive following. We did a comic convention in Glasgow together a couple months ago, and we met a proper Commando Comics fan there, who was genuinely laughing out loud to have met Colin. He was so excited. It was really cool. I was like, that's total life goals for any comic creator, I imagine, to have that kind of effect with a guest, or with we call them punters, with a comic convention guest.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was cool. So we've got my friend Dave. Sorry, as I said, he's Dave Crana. He has a series called Glass City, which is a sort of about a fictional dystopian Glasgow, which is on its 3rd issue, and it's really good. Sort of noir mixed with sort of sci-fi. It's pretty cool. There's a whole thing in I don't know if you guys have this kind of, because in my mind the USA is massive, but we have this kind of weird encroachment thing happening in Scotland where suburbs are growing so much that they effectively. So Glasgow, for example, has traditionally central Glasgow was what most people would regard as Glasgow, but over the last industrial revolution and the last couple 100 years of just social development has meant that Glasgow is actually, there's towns that are just getting sucked into Glasgow. So, in the olden days, maybe the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they might have been their own village, but they're now just a Glasgow suburb because the suburbs have grown out so much. But actually, there's certain roads that you can drive, despite the fact that Glasgow and Edinburgh are like 30 miles apart. There's certain roads you can drive, and you could navigate between the two villages without going into any undeveloped area. You would just drive through villages that are connected to other villages, and there's a lot of sort of social development theory out there that suggests that if that sort of level of development continues over the next 30 or 40 years, a bit like the mega cities in the Judge Dredd comics, like you've got eventually it would just swallow up entire like sections of the world, and you would just have these like mad cities, and Edinburgh would be kind of like a part of a bigger city that also included Glasgow, but they would effectively be the same town.
Probably like a Twin Cities kind of deal. Because I was just looking up pictures of Glasgow, and it's definitely like huge. I feel like that's happened to a lot of major cities, or like here, like Los Angeles. Like I feel like most people probably see Los Angeles as a city, but Los Angeles is actually a county that just has a ton of cities that are now just one area, and they have like typically there's county police officers and there's city police officers and then there's state police officers. But like there's basically just LA County police officers all over that area. They don't really have like separate, like they do, but they don't necessarily have separate police stations as like the main policing of the area, even though it's basically just expanded to this massive area. And that happens a lot with other cities where they start to grow, the suburbs get built out, and then some of the buildings of the downtown start moving away and start getting larger towards the outskirts. So yeah, that happens all the time.
Yes, it's totally that. And so my friends like imagined what that town would look like, and it's Glasgow's a really fascinating town. It's a town I spend quite a lot of time in, but it's I don't know, like I don't know. I've not travelled enough to know if other cities kind of have this thing, but there's a lot of gentrification and rebuilding going on in Glasgow, but it seems to happen quite irrationally. Like so you end up having these super beautiful, developed structures, and then they're mixed in with they're mixed in with sort of underdeveloped like traditional buildings and historic buildings. So you have you'll have a block that looks super modern and super new right next to something that looks really gothic and then next to that there's right next you've got I can't even remember what that sort of era of Art Nouveau. There was an Art Nouveau movement in Glasgow, and then you'll have three buildings that look completely different, and they're right next to each other, and there's no town planning at all. It just looks mad.
Yeah, that happens sometimes here. Like even the city I went to university in, they basically had. The university itself was buying a bunch of buildings around it, and some of them are historical, so they can't knock them down. But they'll knock down everything next to it and build new buildings. So you'll have like this random historic building and then new building right next to it, and then you'll have the house they couldn't buy because they wouldn't sell it next to that. I remember going out to actually back to LA. I was in LA at an Airbnb, and this lady had like this small one-story house right next to a bunch of like almost, they weren't quite skyscrapers yet, but they were getting to like the 5-6 story apartment buildings like right next door. And it's just this random house there because she won't sell the land. And it's just hilarious because like that's basically what happens. And then if she waits long enough, whoever eventually might buy that property might want to build a new style house, and it'll be right in the middle of all these other buildings. So yeah, that happens a lot when especially when they try to basically turn a suburb into a city, right? They try to absorb it into the main part of the city. And when they do that, some people don't want to sell their houses immediately. So they get a bunch of contractors. They'll build these 4 houses they were able to, or these 4 buildings they were able to buy the land for. And then later they'll have another developer who build these houses. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see it.
It's interesting. It's entertaining. And I mean, Glasgow at the moment is effectively Gotham. All the I believe I've not seen the new Batman film yet, so please don't shout at me. I
have not seen it yet either.
I do know there's a motorcycle sequence in a graveyard, and there's a really awesome graveyard in Glasgow called the Necropolis, which I believe is where that was filmed.
That's awesome.
I think so, because like all of Gotham in the movie is based in Liverpool, so they could have went there to do that.
I think a lot of the films are doing that now. I think obviously we're probably cheaper to film in Scotland.
Yeah, less taxes.
Because Leeds, I think, is getting used for Secret Invasion. Leeds is like a sort of northern industrial town in England. I say Glasgow at the moment, and I do know that a lot of the scenes were filmed. A lot of the scenes for the Batman were filmed there. Also, I quite liked it because there's a sequence in The Flash that's getting filmed. I was in Glasgow for a weekend with my wife last year. Actually, they were filming scenes set after the moon landings for the new Indiana Jones film in the street that me and my wife were in, which was really cool. So it was like this traditional Glasgow avenue, and they all the front of the decor and the shots was all filmed. It was all like 99 cents gas and stuff like that. It was really smart. But 2 weeks later, they were filming a Batman sequence for the new Flash film outside a gay bar that I was in with my wife and our friends, and so I follow this specific bar, this LGBT friendly place on Facebook, and they were like, they were posting all the pictures from their front door of like the bat pod driving past, and they're like, "Do you think you'll come in for a drink if we ask him?" And then I know Batgirl's getting filmed here as well at the moment, and then obviously there was a huge section of Infinity War was filmed in Edinburgh, which was really smart. I'm a high school teacher, so I took some kids through and showed them the shop where there's a clothes shop that has like it's the street that me and my pals used to go in like when we were like 15 and 16. It was where we used to go and like buy cigarettes and drink beer, because it was like this really trendy. It wasn't trendy, but it was kind of edgy, and it's where all like the vinyl record shops were. And me and my friends thought we were punks and we could hang around and up there. And the scene where Vision gets stabbed in Infinity War, and it starts like this big battle scene, is on this specific street, and there's quite a distinctive poster that's like, it says "We'll fry your kebab" in the window, and it's like, if you watch that scene in Infinity War, it's when Wanda and Vision are chatting, and then you can see it right in the background. It's just
that's awesome.
It's designed to look like a traditional fish and chip shop in Scotland, but it says "We'll fry your kebab" on the poster, and that's a clothes shop normally, and that clothes shop now has that poster in their window. I think it's obviously their little claim to fame. We're that kebab shop from Infinity War.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Like when you get certain films like in your area. I think like one time we had a major film that recorded on one of the highways in Albany, which in upstate New York, and they had to like shut down the whole highway to do like a chase scene and stuff.
They actually had the Netflix show The Punisher. It was actually on like a certain bridge. Just a section of a bridge was used for that show in Albany. And I was just like, what?
You run there's loads of folk in Edinburgh and Glasgow that do like these superhero tours. Like I think it's done through like Airbnb, where you can just go and like somebody will take you for a walk. And I think it's just random. It's like you just put your name, in the same way that you can just put your flat up for like a room in your flat up on Airbnb. You can advertise like to offer up an experience, and like there's loads of them in Scotland for just like the Outlander. Do you guys like Outlander? That's the big thing that everybody always asks us about. Because that was all.
I've never watched it, but I know of it.
Yeah, that's total massive. And I think it's just a massive show, but a lot of it's filmed in like the area where I live, and a lot of it was filmed in Dunfermline or villages in and around Dunfermline. But it gets kind of crazy. There's a small town called Couris, but it's spelled Culross, and I spend quite a lot of time there just because it's lovely. But you do see people like walking into the middle of the street when there's traffic because they want to take like a specific photo of a building from a specific angle because it showed up in Outlander like that. And you're like, yeah, this is a function in town, man. Like, these cars won't slow down.
There's a place in San Francisco that's super famous. It's the Winding Road. I think it's like just an L, like dang,
I think I saw Gordon Ramsay on it in a program that they broadcast over here.
Oh, I'm sure, but it's so funny because I physically walked there when I was visiting a few years ago, and so I'm just on the sidewalk and I walk all the way up. And there is a line of cars waiting to go through this thing. And one of the cars that comes through ends up pulling into one of the houses. And I just hear him get out of the car. It's like, he's like swearing because all these tourists are preventing him from getting into his own house. And I'm like, why would you choose to live here? You definitely weren't born and raised here. You clearly bought this property. And it's probably worth a ton of money. So if it's that frustrating, sell it or rent it out so you don't have to live there, right? Let somebody else deal with it. But yeah, like it was so crazy because people, you're right, like they'll just stand in the middle of the street and take pictures, and they're so like focused on like wanting to get their shot. I actually watched. They have to have traffic people on the top and bottom of this road to direct people to make sure that there's no accidents occurring because they're so distracted. And I literally watched the guy on the top of the hill have a BMW roll over his foot. And I'm like, I'm like looking at his foot. I'm like, ah, and he looks down, like he was one of those like delayed reactions. I'm like, that's your foot, and like he's like, ah, and like he's like yelling at the guy in the car, and like the guy's like what? Like he didn't know what he did. I'm like move, move. Like they're so focused, like, oh, I just want to drive down this street. And I gotta remember the name. Windy Street in San Francisco.
Windy. That's a really Scottish word, man.
Lombard Street. That's what it is. Lombard Street. Yeah, but it literally goes back and forth like this, like 4 times in like less than a block. And it's like the other really cool thing about it is that there's actually like the macaw parrots, like the bright red parrots that are from like South America. I think they're not native to the U.S. They live only, I think, in South America, and somebody accidentally or on purpose like released their macaws in that area, and then for whatever reason, there's so much like lush greenery on this street that they can survive there, and they've flourished, and there's a bunch of them.
That's amazing.
It's so random. Like there's just a bunch of these parrots there, and you're like, what the hell? It's like so weird.
Isn't that what Gilbert Gottfried plays in Aladdin?
A parrot?
Yeah, isn't he?
Yeah, he might be. Yeah.
I thought that was.
Nah, I don't think he's like a macaw. Like the macaw is the one that's like red, and then the tail's colorful, like a bunch of different colors.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah. I'm pretty sure if I'm thinking of the right name.
First I was gonna be like,
you Google it. That's what I always do. You Google it. What kind of bird?
Yeah. It's like mostly red from head to back, but then its wings are like yellow, green, blue. Like they're like that. Those types of parrots. Yeah, but like they're just randomly in San Francisco. You're like, what the hell?
There's loads of animals like that. Like to go back to like how crap we British were. I think the only reason you guys have rats was because we brought them over. Was it not like I'm gonna have to fact check that obviously, but I'm pretty sure the British brought. I'm pretty sure it was the British that brought rats over.
Oh, to the States, you mean?
Yeah, I think so.
Take them back.
We'll stay in the boat. It's fine. No, and I do want to point out before I forget, and because he will watch this and he'll give me a row. My friend, so as well as Colin and David on my show, I've got our friend Andrew is also a co-host, and he's a comic book shop owner in a small town called Kirkcaldy, in Fife, where I'm from in central Scotland, and he's a total awesome. He's like a total comic guru, and he's doing what Dylan's doing right now. Whenever like we're hosting the podcast, like myself and the rest of the guys will blether, and you can just hear Andrew going.
I was curious. I was trying to remember if it was macaw. I looked it up. I don't think they're macaw, but they are brightly colored. They're like green and red and a bunch of bright colors. But I was curious because I'm like skimming through trying to find the name, and it said apparently a commonly held belief is that the parrots were released by a woman who was having a psychotic break and subsequently burned down the pet store where they were housed and then like let them go, which apparently that's partially true. But that's crazy.
It does have like an urban legendy kind of vibe to it, doesn't it? Like you can it can grow arms and legs quite quickly. I think that kind of story.
Yeah, here's the I'll show you this real quick. This is the type of parrot. Yeah, see it? Yeah, so they're like bright. That's not the macaw, but it's a brightly colored. It's like red and green. It doesn't say what it is in here, but yeah, see, like they're random. Like they're not supposed to be there. They're just randomly there.
Are they pests? Are they
Oh, like do they bother people? Other than making noise, not really.
That's the thing about a lot of these animals, aren't they? Because they like rats and the rabbits is it a certain rabbit that got released by British people in Australia?
Wasn't that to like eat like bugs or something? It was to do something, yeah.
But
and then just like wreck it.
They had no natural predators in these areas. They just became like total.
Yeah, it's like the wolves of Yellowstone Park. We had deer out of control, so we're like, well, let's just release a couple wolves, and then they like got out of control and started eating all the deer, and then like, oh crap, now we got to hunt the wolves. So like, yeah, we do that all the time. We're like, oh yeah, like this seems like it. Well, actually, didn't that happen? That's happened a couple times in Australia. Didn't they have like an issue where like a bunch of emus, or I think it was like emus or ostriches, something like that, where they got like super out of control. to the point where they tried to hunt them down. They had the whole military with like trucks and guns trying to stop them, and they literally like this is like an infamous story where I think they literally couldn't get them, and they actually lost. Like they got overwhelmed by the birds, and like it's this epic story of like the battle of the Australia army against these birds, and they lose. They couldn't stop them.
That's really cool. Do you often hear stories like that, and you're like, you just take a wee note because you're like, there's a comic here.
Yeah. I love those ideas because, like, not necessarily the exact idea, but the idea that it's kind of funny where, you know, you could have like a pest thing get out of control and then you try to fight it, but they're actually so powerful that even your best military equipment can't stop them. It's like it's such a weird story. So yeah, it's like I do like that stuff.
I actually looked.
Go for it. No, go for it, Greg. Tell us the story.
So I actually Google it, and it is a scarlet macaw that is the bird in Aladdin.
Oh, you had to. Yeah. You just said to me there, Greg, where you can't let it go. You have to.
I had to make sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I read a story at the last weekend that I've scribbled down. I don't know if you guys do it, but like obviously as well as like hosting the podcast, I know you guys both do quite a bit of writing. Like, do you send shit to like your friends thinking it's an amazing idea, and then they don't like it just gets deadpanned, or like so I'd read there's apparently a penguin in Edinburgh Zoo that has like I know so the penguins in Edinburgh Zoo are like really quite famous just because they go on like a parade every day. They literally open up the penguin enclosure and let these penguins walk through the zoo once a day. It's totally amazing. It's really smart. If you're in Edinburgh, go to see the penguin parade. It's pretty cool. But, there's apparently an emperor penguin that became like the official mascot during World War II. It became the official mascot of the Norwegian, like a Norwegian-based, in Scotland we housed quite a lot of foreign troops from like obviously, and then in the UK in general, like a lot when the Nazis took over France, a lot of like French people, the Free French we called them, they moved to England for a wee while, and were part of the guys that landed during D-Day. You know, there was just and just stuff like that. But there's loads of really awesome stories like that in any war. But there's these sort of Norwegian soldiers that totally fell in love with the penguins and gave.
You said it was the emperor penguin. Is that one with like the orange?
I think so.
Yeah.
They totally loved this penguin and like gave it. I'm gonna have to Google that now. Edinburgh Zoo, but like it's now got I think it's a Commodore now. So they basically gave it a military rank in the Norwegian army, and then it's slowly been promoted. And then obviously they've then like when that penguin's died, they've then just given the title to another penguin to keep the story going.
Oh, the emperor penguin's just like the regular penguin.
Yeah.
Like when you think penguin, it's like the normal penguin.
I think we're thinking rockhopper, aren't we? The big like the.
Yeah, the one with like the orange, the penguin with orange hair, something like that. It's like eyebrows or something. I don't remember. Yeah, these guys.
So
macaroni.
Yeah,
really
rockhoppers, aren't you?
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's this penguin from. He's called. I'll butcher the name. So like there's a penguin at Edinburgh Zoo. He's a king penguin. So he's not an emperor penguin. He's called Nils Olav. He's just the name they've given this penguin. He's named after Olav V of Norway, and he's officially a brigadier in the Norwegian army. This penguin. So I was like, I wonder if like this penguin's like secretly like penguins are self-aware and he knows, and he's just letting this happen. So eventually he's going to get to a rank where he'll get promoted to a rank where like he can just like call it in,
take over.
Yeah.
Did you ever see the penguins of Madagascar?
Exactly that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Just one day.
Just smile and wave, boys. Just smile and wave.
One day he just takes over. One day he takes over Norway, and they're like, we can't stop it because he's got military jurisdiction to do everything.
That's awesome.
I'm part of an anthology that's coming out on Kickstarter at some point soon. I don't know when, but I wrote a story, and it's a kaiju story, and my kaiju monster is part penguin and part like giant polar bear. So it's just this weird looking fucking thing. And when it walks on water, it like freezes the water. It's sick. Yeah.
That's pretty
I'm
cool.
like, oh, I'm gonna just put 2 Arctic type animals together and see what happens.
What's the are you allowed to talk about the anthology?
I think so. I think he probably wants me to promote stuff.
Yeah.
It's called Kaiju Mania, and it's
amazing.
so there's I think 4 different stories. There's my story, there's Travis Gibb, and then I think there's 2 others, but I forgot who the other 2 were. And Alan Johnson or Scotty, whatever his name goes by. And the other one, I don't know the other one, but they all get like taken by aliens after like we do our little story. A UFO comes, takes the kaiju, and then they're gonna go into like a WrestleMania type match thing.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So yeah, I have like 4 pages. I think each story is like 4 pages or something like that. And then there's like a whole like fight thing. I think that's going to happen in that one, or there's might be a second issue or something. But yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah.
We did me and my fellow Brewgooders, we for a wee while there we're meeting in a bar on a Sunday and just going for I should be doing it right now, but the rest of the Brewgooders are away. So but we would meet and we developed a story called Kaiju Rodeo, which we would try. I probably need to get it tied down before I share too much, but we were playing around with we're hoping to like co-write it, but it's basically like how many ideas can we throw into one story and see what happens. And it's this kind of I love kaiju stories, but our idea was like, I don't know, this is like, I don't know, might come across quite culturally insensitive now that I've thought about it, but we were like, what would happen if like kaiju started to show up in like Las Vegas through some sort of portal or something? What if that was just for whatever reason the area of the world that they emerged from? And we're saying, well, would some rich oil magnate would he like monetize the whole thing and turn it into like this idea of like guys in mechs riding the back of kaijus for televised like rodeos, and then we were kind of playing around with it and we're like, what could we do, and what different ideas could have, and I was like, obviously with the story would be like this would be a big sport, but then the kaijus break out somehow and they start to like destroy downtown Las Vegas, and they're like, how would they get out? And so my contribution to the story was, did you guys know who the KLF are? I don't know, like they were a dance rave band in the UK in the 90s, but they've got a couple of songs. If you Google them, they famously burnt £1 million on an island in Scotland in the 90s for like a cult. So my contribution to the story of our kaijus was that the kaijus would get broken out of their holding cells by this the Kaiju Liberation Front or the KLF. So like this, like my idea was like PETA for kaijus would show up and be like kaijus are completely like self-aware, and they shouldn't be kept in cages. We should release all.
Oh, like PETA? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I think the other one sounds like something else. Yeah.
So I love
yeah,
it.
they're people too.
Yeah, exactly that. And then the minute they get out, they just revert back to what kaijus do, which is to like eat people and stand on things. And you're like,
dude, they got to use the fountains of Bellagio, like the thing with like it does the water. You got to use that to either distract them, or that's where they go to take a bath. Like they're like, oh, I just want to cool down, because it's like a giant ass fountain.
Well, they get used to the writing team, because that's exactly what we thought. Like, just like there's so much you could do with that kind of idea. I love a good kaiju.
I was going to say, especially because like Las Vegas has so many giant buildings that are like overly like there's like a volcano there, there's like a pyramid there, there's a what's it called, that area that has a bunch of like there's like a roller coaster and a Statue of Liberty and an Eiffel Tower all like in one area. Like there's like they can just go there and like in one scene you get one of those epic like Godzilla like scenes like destroying the Statue of Liberty, but then like the very next thing they do is destroy the Eiffel Tower. And you're like, what the hell's going on?
I love that. I'm gonna steal that off you.
That'd be like a cool way to like intro it, even if you do like one of those things where you flash back to the rodeo, but like to start off where it's like the kaiju's destroyed everything, bam, and it's the Eiffel Tower, and it came for it all, bam, it's like the Statue of Liberty, like what the hell, are they all over the world? It's like, no, they're just in downtown Las Vegas.
That's amazing. That's a great. It sort of reminded me of, there's that film Team America where like the Eiffel Tower blows up and it lands on the Arc de Triomphe, and you're like, actually, in reality, I've been to Paris a couple of times. In reality, those buildings are miles away from each other.
Yeah, yeah, I love that though.
Aye. Yeah. I don't know. What was the question? We were talking about my podcast like ages ago, weren't we?
Oh yeah, we talked about the podcast. We tangented off to kaiju stories. And
yep, good. I like to do that. That's what I'm known for in my podcast.
I think it also started the birds. I think that's where it started. I think something happened where somebody mentioned I think you mentioned the penguins, and then I mentioned the macaws that are out of place, and then we tangented off.
Penguin kaiju thing.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're full circle.
I have we were quite lucky, and we've got Colin on our podcast, and he's really good at just going on that note, and then he takes us right back to what we're talking about.
And that's what we call a segue.
Yeah.